This is the first in a series of 3 short videos that aim to give you the understanding you need about how photosynthesis works in plants. In this video, we'll take a basic introduction to photosynthesis and then introduce more detail in the following 2 videos. So what do we mean by photosynthesis? What's the point of it? Well, it's a process that plants and some other organisms such as algae and certain bacteria can carry out that uses light energy to convert what's called inorganic carbon, carbon dioxide from the air, into organic forms of carbon, such as carbohydrates like glucose and starch shown here. This is important because carbon in the form of CO2 is of no practical use to living things. We can't use it as a food. We can't incorporate it into our structures, and so it's useless. So this is a way of taking carbon in that useless form effectively and turning it into a form that can then be used by living things for their life processes. At a very simple level, photosynthesis gets represented by the equation shown here, and you might be familiar with this from previous studies. It represents the fact that photosynthesis does use carbon dioxide and water that plants obtain from the environment around them, and can end up with glucose as the product and oxygen as a byproduct. All of these things are true in a way, but really by the end of this series of videos you'll see that this is a great simplification and not really the level that you'll be talking about at all. Let's look now at where photosynthesis takes place in plants, and most of the photosynthesis will be happening in the leaves, and specifically in the cells called palisade cells that you see sort of lined up here under the upper epidermis of the leaf. This makes sense if you think about it. The top of the leaf will be receiving most of the sunlight, and so that'll be a rich area for photosynthesis to take place. Photosynthesis obviously requires more than just sunlight, so the cells will need also carbon dioxide and water provided. The carbon dioxide can enter the leaf directly through the stomata, the little pores, and you see one at the bottom of the diagram there, and diffuse up through the spongy mesophyll area to the palisade cells. And water will be brought up from the soil through the roots and then on up through the xylem and delivered into the leaf cells that way. Within plant cells, the job of carrying out photosynthesis is undertaken by structures called chloroplasts, and you can see a chloroplast here cut open to reveal its contents. It's quite complicated to look at, more complicated than you might have imagined. Perhaps you just thought it contained some of the chlorophyll you've probably heard of before, but you can see there's more to it than that. The key points to note is that it has a membrane which encloses a region within that's filled with an aqueous solution, and that's called the stroma. And then sitting within the stroma are these stacks of discs. The individual discs are called thylakoids, and a stack of them is a granum. And even the thylakoids have their own structure. You can see some of them cut open, revealing that each thylakoid has its own outer membrane, and then enclosing within that a region filled with another aqueous solution, and that's called the thylakoid lumen. These will be very significant when we come to look at the specifics of the chemistry of photosynthesis. We'll finish this first video just by introducing what's coming next, and there'll be 2 further videos because photosynthesis can be split into 2 main stages. The first stage is called the light-dependent reactions, LDR, and very simply it's called that because the reactions that take part in it require energy from light. So this is where the sunlight of photosynthesis comes in. That light is captured and produces some very useful substances, ATP and NADPH, that are then essential for the second stage. But as well as those things, this first stage also produces oxygen from water. So this is where the oxygen product of photosynthesis is produced. In stage 2, we have some further reactions, and these are given the name the light independent reactions, LIR, and so this reveals the fact that these reactions can happen without the requirement of sunlight. Instead, they use the ATP and NADPH produced in the first stage to make the reactions happen. And it's here that the carbon dioxide is required, and it's here that inorganic form of carbon, the carbon dioxide, is converted into an organic form, which is called glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate G3P. And it's this G3P that's really considered to be the main product of photosynthesis that can then be turned into all kinds of things by the plant. So rather than specifically glucose being the product of photosynthesis, it's this very useful G3P molecule that the photosynthesis reactions end up with.